From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
I want to tell you about a minister who, as he was kind of getting ready for his morning service, he was at the church and he was a little bit preoccupied, a little bit stressed because he didn't know quite how he was going to ask the congregation to come up with more money for some repairs that they had to do. And so he was a little bit annoyed also by the fact that he learned at the last minute that the regular organist was sick. And they had a substitute organist show up. And so that substitute organist was looking for direction, you know, what to play. And he just kind of thrust an order of service to him and said, there's a couple of hymns on there, you know, get in tune with that. And but he said, you know, you'll have to think of something to play after I make this announcement to the congregation about the finances. And so in the time of the service came and he was telling about the repairs that needed to be done. And you need to raise however many thousands of dollars. And then he said, so any of you who are willing to pledge $1,000 or more, please stand. And at that precise moment, the substitute organist began to play the Star-Spangled Banner. And through patriotic conditioning, virtually the whole congregation stood. And so now you know how it was that the substitute organist became the regular organist. Well, today we celebrate freedom and independence. And actually, we recognize that there are two kinds of freedom. There is the outer freedom and the inner freedom. And both, of course, are very important. We hold dear. And outer freedom is what this land of America has always represented to the world. And it's a place where people can come and create a life and have freedoms of opportunity. And we understand that a person also can live, you know, in a free land or any land, really, and not necessarily have inner freedom. That it's not guaranteed by the geographical place that you find. That you can be in the land of the free, but not be free internally. And so certainly outer freedom is nothing to be, take for granted. It's something that we all are very grateful for. Hopefully we all are. I certainly am. I'm very grateful to our founding fathers, what they stood for, and what it is that they set in motion for all of us. It was well over 200 years ago now that this group of men got together to create a free nation and called it the United States. I love the idea of united. Anytime that people come together in unity, united, there's something powerful. If the intention is for good, freedom is for good. And that group of individuals that came together believed strongly in the principles of freedom. And among them were people like Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin and John Adams and a number of others as well. But it was Thomas Jefferson that was selected to write this document or draft it. And actually, it went back and forth between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. They said, you do it. No, you do it. You do it. No, you do it. And finally, it was decided that Thomas Jefferson would, because John Adams said, you're younger than I am. I'm older than you. I have a lot more enemies than you. And so anyway, that was really among their friendship how it was decided. And so Jefferson put together this document and brought it back to the group. And when he read it to them, they were amazed, really. They were all really taken with it because it was spiritually based without being necessarily religious. It had been written in a way in which it had incorporated spirituality, but it was not exclusive to a religion. Christianity or any other. It was not exclusive to one denomination or to a certain dogma. And there was a strong foundation of faith and belief in a supreme being that was built into it as well. And this supreme being that he spoke of and represented was seen to be something that was in all of us, because that we all have certain inalienable rights and that those rights are available to everyone. And I feel like, based on my studies of Thomas Jefferson, he was a spiritual man, and he had depth to him. And he had done his own study, actually, of the scriptures. And he had looked at everything and selected and pulled out from the Gospels everything that Jesus had said. And he took it from the King James Version of the Bible, and he put that into kind of his own Bible, and it has come to be known as the Jefferson Bible. And he corresponded a lot with John Adams. They had a lot of letters that are still historically found that you can read through of exchanges that the two of them had. And when he had gone through this process of studying the Bible and lifted the teachings of Jesus, he wrote to and corresponded to John Adams and said, "I have come to the separation of the diamonds from the dunghill in the teachings of Jesus." Apparently, he felt some of what was there in the scriptures conflicted with other approach or ideas, and that perhaps it was misrepresented, mistranslated, certain aspects or things that were said. That was his view. And he tried to simplify it. And he wrote to Adams saying, "The teachings of Jesus are simple, they're basic. There's only one God, that God is perfect, and God and man are one. And to love God with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself is really the sum of religion." And he said, "These are the great points on which I endeavor to reform and live my life." So he made it very simple. We're all one. There's one God. That God is perfect. We've all been created by that one God. That makes us really all together. And that's what he'd lifted from the teachings of Jesus. And that certainly is accurate. Whatever it was that he did not choose to align with or that he felt didn't fit. So at the foundation of our country is a belief, that all are created equal and that there are certain inalienable rights that we cannot separate ourselves from, really. And these are the right to life and to liberty and to the pursuit of happiness. And as part of that Declaration of Independence, there was also a part in which it spelled out that there was a firm reliance on a divine providence. And that was essentially reworded later, I think, to "In God we trust." That there had to be a trust, that there was a supreme being that was in favor of freedom and a unitedness and a belief that we're all equal. And that would be a part of the life of these United States, was knowing that they were connected to that. And that document says really also that we all continue to play a role, to show up in this world in regard to the importance of freedom, and it's ongoing. That also the idea that there is one God, and that God is perfect, and that God and man are one, and that to love God with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself is really what it's about for us. And we can ask, well, who is our neighbor? And of course, I think we all would agree that Jesus meant humanity. Leaves no one out, was not any one exclusive group by any means. Every individual is part of that neighbor, being a neighbor. And, we're to learn to want freedom, therefore, for everyone. We want to set people free. Whatever their creed, their color, their culture, their religion, let there be nothing that separates us, really. And so, there's a wonderful story that I came across, I love, and it's told by the author Charlotte Edwards, and it's a true story, and she's actually telling it about a friend. Her friend told her this, and her friend lived on the eastern shores of Maryland, where the water comes inland, and there's kind of fingers of water, and there's creeks and coves amidst that. And anyway, that's where this lady lived. And the Canada geese, they know about this place, and they like to come to it, that area. And there are white swans that like to come there, and there are ducks as well. And she says that in the autumn, there are literally thousands of Canada geese and white swans and ducks all around there. And the swans have these real strong beaks, she says, that really go after their food at the bottom of these creeks. And she also says that there's real indifference between the white swans and the geese. There's almost a disdain, one for the other. That's what she felt anyway. They just never display any kind of love for one another, that's for sure. And anyway, she said there are times of the year when, the cold sets in at times, and there's sleet that comes and a certain amount of snow, and it will freeze the water where these fingers come in, where it's a little bit more shallow and narrow. And so she was at breakfast one morning, and she looked out as she was making and preparing the table. She had a big picture window there, and she looked out, and she noticed that there was one lone goose out there, all by itself, and that it was kind of still, it wasn't moving. And so she went and got her binoculars and put the binoculars on it, and she saw that actually it was frozen in the ice. Its legs were frozen, and it was not moving. And about then, she also, with her binoculars, saw a line of white swans, in a single line, flying over, and that all of a sudden they came and lowered themselves and formed a circle and just came down around and surrounded this goose. And so now they had it surrounded, and knowing that they're not liking one another, her fear was that these swans would attack with those strong beaks and would kill this goose. But what she found was something very different. She was amazed to see that these swans gathered around in close and started pecking with their beaks into the ice to try and free this goose. And she said it went on for quite a long time. It wasn't just a few minutes. It went on. They worked. And that finally it was freed. And at the point that it was freed, all the swans lifted into flight, and they kind of hovered, looking at the results of their labor. And they realized that the goose, though it was now freed in its legs, could not even open its wings, that the sleet had basically caused it to be pinned its wings to its side. So 4 of the swans returned back while the others hovered, and the 4 went and came up to this goose and started pecking on the ice around its body and broke it free. And at that point, when the goose finally began to open its wings and spread and stretch them once again, then the other 4 joined the other swans that were waiting in the air. And at that point, the goose that had been freed joyously took off and joined the swans. And the swans and this goose flew over the trees and out of sight for this lady. It was quite a sight to behold. And she, wiping tears from her eyes, she says that from that experience comes one hopeful question. If so for birds, why not man? That essentially she was saying, look at what even these birds have a way of showing up, that they move beyond their differences and they can help someone be set free, or at least another creature. That somehow there is something even within these birds that caused them to come in to the aid in that way. So we live in the land of the free, externally the land of the free. And yet there's another land that we have to make our way through. We live in this inner land, this inner domain that's so important and vital that we manage that inner land that we live in. And we can become sometimes inwardly frozen. Sometimes our hearts will harden. Sometimes we allow our minds to create ideas of separation or exclusivity or whatever. And that's not what the world is meant to be about in any form or fashion. We're there to be there for each other, really, in some way. And not all the world certainly has learned that yet, but those of us who have learned it and need to be committed to it need to offset those who are not yet ready. So we pave the way, that we show the way, that we model it, because that's what Jesus was about, and that's what Thomas Jefferson was saying. It's all about uniting and coming together. It's so important. And so freedom comes to us when we weed out the false from the true. And I've mentioned it in the past. I kind of like to, for the teaching idea, say that there are, if you think of it, we have 2 selves. And the truth is we have many selves. okay? We have a personality, and within the content of our personality and our unconscious, we have many selves. But if, for the sake of our growth and understanding, I like to think of it as though we have the one self that we're held to be in the mind of God. We are the one self that God created us to be. It is the sacred higher self. It is the Christ within. It is the divinity of God that is inherent in you. Okay, that's who you are, and it's perfect and whole and complete, but we've been given free choice. And therefore, as free choice, we get to be whoever and show up however we want, in alignment with that which we're held to be, which is truth, or in alignment with something that is false, untrue, and usually creates a certain amount of suffering, but certainly separation. Separation from us, from others, from life, what have you. And I call that the separate self. Some do the ego, argues for separation, that part of our mind. The Holy Spirit always argues for love and oneness and coming together. And so there is this dynamic that goes on. The real you sometimes gets covered over by various images, thoughts of weakness instead of strength, limitation versus unlimitedness, guilt rather than innocence, judgments, and sometimes the hate in the world instead of love and forgiveness. And so the remedy is always really, at least to some extent, to become quiet with yourself and come back to who you are, to remember who you are, to re-identify with that part of you that God created. That is the truth about you, because that truth will set you free. The Course in Miracles has a statement that has been with me for years. When I found myself out of sorts, I will try and remember to say, I am as God created me. I am His Son eternally. That's from the Course in Miracles. I am as God created me. I am His Son eternally. Let's say that. I am as God created me. I am His Son eternally. The divine knows us only as we truly are, as children of God, whole and complete. Now, in the Gospel of John, Jesus said, you are from below and I am from above. You are of this world and I am not of this world. And a lot of people think of that literally, like he was saying, I'm not of this world, meaning geographically. I came from some other place off in the skies above. But what he's talking about in terms of above is in consciousness. I come from an awakened consciousness of total love. You see, I come from above and bring into this lower consciousness the truth of who you are. All right? And so the world carries hate and judgments and lack and greed and fear and abuse of power and various ideas of separation. That's not who I am, and that's not the world. That's not the world that I live in. And so he's saying to those present, he says, if you continue in my word, in my teachings, then you are truly my disciples. And you will then know the truth from what is not true, and that truth will set you free. It's back to knowing the truth of who you are, who you're held to be in the mind of God, and that's the work we have to do internally, because so much in the world is telling us we're something else. We are going through different things. We go through challenges and problems and what have you, and then we make decisions about ourselves and life and others that are not accurate, not true, you see, because appearances often lie. And so Jesus then says, well, not Jesus, but those who he was speaking to, they said, well, we've never been in bondage to anyone. How is it that you say we can be made free? And of course, they were talking about, we're not in bondage to Egypt anymore. We're not in bondage to Babylon anymore. We're not in bondage out there. Jesus was talking about internally. And so Jesus responds by saying, truly, I say to you, truly, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. I use the word sin, but again, you understand that sin is an archery term. It means to miss the mark, to miss the target, and that basically what you need to do is take aim again, not simply label yourself forever a sinner. Life means we're going to make mistakes. Therefore, we have to choose again, choose higher, aim, take new aim. And so he is saying that, everyone that basically is in the pattern of false beliefs, false ideas about yourself, about life, about humanity, you become a slave to that. It doesn't feel good to live from that. Things don't work out when you are in that space. And so you're missing the mark. And so there's the part of God that created us, the part of us that is of God, that is the real you and me. And so basically, we want to get beyond being a slave to our fears, to the guilts that we have carried, to being held to the past, to become more in the moment. Anything that separates us, we want to take note of and release it and get back into the moment and remember the truth of who we are. Now, Byron Katie is a wonderful teacher, speaker, author. She's been here several times. It reminds me what we're saying here, it has a lot to do with some of what Byron Katie teaches, and she calls it the work. It's internal work that you have to do, and she has 4 quick steps that help you move from a thought that doesn't feel good in you to releasing it and removing loyalty to it. And so she has like 4 steps or 4 questions. And the first question she asks you, if you're feeling out of sorts, if you're feeling unhappy, if you're annoyed by this person or this situation or that, whatever it is that's inside of you, your guru is your feelings, then you have a thought that has you in separation. So she says to ask, is it true? Is that thought true? And the next question she says is, can you absolutely know it's true? And it's almost like taking it to the next level, whether you're really lying to yourself or you're hiding behind your loyalty to that thought or whatever. And to ask, could it be that your thoughts about whatever that has you out of sorts is a factor here? Because the third question she tells you to ask is, how do you react when you think that thought? In other words, notice the effects, have a measurable sense of, oh, this feels crummy when I do think this thought. And if that's the case, it somehow has you in separation. And can you see that there is a good reason to drop that thought? So you're no longer suffering, you're no longer out of peace. And the 4th step I love, the 4th question. She says, who would you be without that thought? I love that. Boy, that nails it. If you let go of that thought, that judgment, that whatever, who would you be? That thought of limitation, that thought about yourself or another, who would you be? That's very powerful. And the next thing is really, she doesn't call it a step, but it's where she says, now reverse it, turn it around. And she's basically, in one way or another, saying, whatever you've been projecting outward, now begin to own your part in creating this feeling, as opposed to thinking it's the world or someone doing it to you. So reverse it. And as opposed to, they're doing this to me, no, I'm doing this to myself. And at that point, you begin to be able to see you have the power to let go of it. But the key is, who would you be without that thought? That's important to me. Jesus said, he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. What do you mean by that? He means that we have to lose the life that we have been patterned to in regard to loyalty to a separate self, in terms of loyalty and pattern to our fears, to our judgments, to hanging on to the past, to lovelessness, anything of separation. And when we lose that self that we created, what remains is the truth of what God created. And therefore, that's the life that we're meant to live, is from that space. You know, there's a little story that about a guy that was cleaning the sanctuary. He had a part-time job while he was in college, and it was a big church. And so on Saturday, he was cleaning this, and a window was open, and a little bird flew in. And it was flying all around, then got frantic trying to figure out how to get back out. And so this guy was trying to help it, trying to catch it. It was like a young bird. And it even flew up into the balcony, raced up there. He thought he had it, and it flew away. And it hit the window a couple times. And finally, in exhaustion, kind of came to the floor. And then he went and gently picked it up and took it to a window and let it go. And the analogy even that he points out is that sometimes, you know, we bang around a lot. Trying to find our way, trying to this way and that way, and hitting and bumping into doors and windows and so forth. And yet there is a hand, there is a guiding hand. It's called the Holy Spirit. Amen. You know, there is a presence and a power. And sometimes that Holy Spirit works through people, you know, to help us. They show up, things happen. But essentially there's something there that we need to trust that will take us to our window of freedom. And the way that the founders spoke of it was, in God we trust. In God we trust. Divine providence. There's something at work that wants to set us free to be who we were created to be. And so it's a very powerful thing for us to get to learn and to realize. And so, the Apostle Paul, he states in 2 Corinthians, he said, now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And then after that, we won't argue with that, right? Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. Right after that, he says, and we all, that means you and me, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being changed into his likeness from one degree of glory to another. And what it's saying, to me anyway, is we all, every one of us, are unveiling and peeling away the separate self that we have created that has covered over the part of us that beholds the glory of the Lord in us. And by doing so, we are being changed into his likeness from one degree of glory to another. That's where we're moving. Now, it's a process. It doesn't happen in a day. Rome wasn't built in a day. We built layers over the top of who we really are. And so whatever we have created, we can dismantle. And so many a master teacher has said, it's not so much learning something new, it's unlearning what you've covered, the real you. And so the process is to really recognize that there's an inner and an outer freedom, and today we honor the outer freedom of which we have and are blessed with, but we also are going to ask ourselves, who would we be without the certain thoughts that we've been so loyal to, without the thought that separates us. True freedom is an inside job. It's how we chip away the ice. It's how we listen to the Spirit that takes us to the window of freedom. James Dillard Freeman, the late James Dillard Freeman, great Unity author, he wrote this poem. It's very brief. How free the hawk at the height of heaven flings himself in flight. But his high flights had first to start, not in the sky, but in his heart. Likewise with me, how shall I find freedom, if not within my mind? And learn as thought by thought I try, that I may fall, yet I can fly, and even sometimes rise up free beyond the highest heights of me. Have a great, great holiday. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.